President Trump, still early in his second term, is once again ignoring direct orders from a U.S. court, and this time, a federal judge has had enough. U.S. District Judge Paula Zines asked what, if anything, the Trump administration had done to follow a Supreme Court ruling. Her conclusion was blunt. To date, nothing has been done, she told the Justice Department lawyer in court on Tuesday. Nothing. The Supreme Court had ordered the government last week to help bring back Armando Abrego Garcia, a Maryland resident who was deported to a dangerous prison in El Salvador, even though a previous court order had blocked that deportation. The administration openly ignored the ruling. From cable news to social media to statements made in the Oval Office, Trump and his team made it clear they had no plans to bring Abrego Garcia back. Judge Zines' comments in court added urgency to a serious question that's been growing louder among officials, legal experts, and the public. If a president won't follow court orders, is the U.S. facing a constitutional crisis? If President Trump won't follow a direct order from the Supreme Court, could the entire U.S. system, with its checks and balances, independent courts, and rule of law, start to break down? Some legal experts say yes. They believe the Trump administration's actions in the Abrego Garcia case may be a turning point. There's no guarantee that President Trump will respect the law or the Constitution, said Jamal Green, a constitutional law professor at Columbia University. And he's already shown many times that he's willing to break those rules. Others believe it's too early to panic. They say the Trump administration is still operating within legal gray areas, and it's possible that clearer instructions from the courts could eventually force them back into compliance, especially if the court's wording leaves less room for legal loopholes. Robert Weisberg, a law professor at Stanford, pointed out that courts still have tools to push back if Trump continues to ignore their rulings, including those from the Supreme Court. For example, if a court clearly says, "You're not allowed to do this," and the administration does it anyway, the court can find the administration in contempt. In that case, the U.S. Marshals, the enforcement arm of the federal courts, could step in to make sure the order is followed, said Professor Weisberg. So there are options, he said. The Supreme Court still has tools it can use. But no matter what happens next, the Abrego Garcia case is already raising big questions, especially in a country worn out by years of bold, often controversial moves from the Trump administration, and the legal battles that followed. From immigration policy to school funding, LGBTQ+ rights, and federal money to the states, lawsuits have piled up. California Attorney General Rob Bonta has filed over a dozen lawsuits against the Trump administration, and has backed several other legal challenges. Other Democrat-led states have joined in as well. Over and over, courts have called out the Trump administration for breaking the law, sometimes in very obvious ways. And in several cases, judges and lawyers say the administration simply refused to follow court orders telling them to change course. For example, California officials say the administration ignored orders to release federal funds, including emergency aid through FEMA. The White House also continued to block Associated Press journalists from events even after a judge ruled they should be allowed back in. In another case, the administration argued it didn't need to return immigrants who were being deported, claiming the plane had already taken off and was outside the judge's reach. But the Abrego Garcia case has brought a new level of concern. On Monday, President Trump met with Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele in the Oval Office, and part of their conversation was about Garcia's case. The meeting only added to growing fears that Trump is willing to completely ignore the courts when they try to rein him in. Abrego Garcia is a Salvadoran citizen who lived in Maryland and worked in sheet metal. He was arrested years ago while looking for work outside a Home Depot. Back in 2019, a judge ruled he should not be deported because returning to El Salvador would put him in danger from a local gang. The ruling allowed him to stay in the U.S. But last month, the Trump administration detained him again, claiming he was part of the MS-13 gang. They deported him, along with others, to a well-known and dangerous prison in El Salvador. His family strongly denied the gang claims and sued the government, saying his rights were violated and the administration had broken the law and ignored the previous judge's order. The case moved quickly through the court system. Facilitate versus effectuate? When Judge Zines first reviewed the case, she found the government's evidence that Abrego Garcia was in a gang to be very weak, basically just a tip from someone saying he wore a Chicago Bulls shirt, which some gang members are known to wear. She ruled that the government had wrongly deported him and ordered the Trump administration to both facilitate and effectuate his return to the U.S. The Trump administration challenged that ruling, and on Thursday, the Supreme Court issued a brief and signed decision. It said the government must facilitate Garcia's return, but not effectuate it. The justices said it wasn't clear what Judge Zines meant by effectuate, and that it might go beyond her authority, especially since foreign affairs are usually handled by the executive branch. They asked her to revise her order with that in mind. Both sides claimed victory. Garcia's lawyers said the ruling clearly meant the government had to take action to bring him back. But the Trump administration also declared it a win, arguing that the court had confirmed the president's control over foreign policy. The Supreme Court rightly acknowledged that foreign affairs are the president's job, a Justice Department spokesperson said. By reminding everyone to respect the powers of the executive branch, this ruling once again shows that activist judges have no authority to take over the president's role in handling international relations. After the Supreme Court's decision, Judge Zines responded with another order, again telling the Trump administration to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. That led to a meeting in the Oval Office on Monday, where Trump and Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele made it clear they were not going to bring Garcia back. Legal experts were stunned by the argument that followed. Trump officials said they'd be willing to send a plane to pick up Garcia, if El Salvador would release him. But Bukele pushed back, saying his country couldn't return Garcia because it would be like smuggling a terrorist into an allied country. "Of course, I'm not going to do it," Bukele said. "The question is ridiculous." In the same meeting, Trump made a chilling comment, "The homegrowns are next." Many saw this as a threat, suggesting he might try to send American citizens to Salvadoran prisons next, which would be a direct violation of U.S. law. At a court hearing the next day, Judge Zines saw just how narrowly the Trump administration was interpreting her order. Their idea of facilitating Garcia's return appeared to mean doing as little as possible, and only if Garcia somehow made it back to the U.S. border on his own. "If Abrego Garcia shows up at a port of entry, we'll allow him back in," said Drew Ensign, a lawyer for the Justice Department. He also handed over a transcript of the Oval Office meeting, arguing the issue had reached the highest level of government. Judge Zines wasn't convinced. She demanded written proof of what the administration had actually done in recent days to follow the court's orders. Legal experts say this could be the beginning of the court finding the Trump administration in contempt, a serious step that would test whether the courts still have the power to hold a sitting president accountable, especially if the administration refuses to listen. Erwin Chemerinsky, dean of UC Berkeley Law School, raised a tough question. Would the Justice Department or U.S. Marshals even enforce a contempt order against the administration? Do we still have the guardrails to protect our Constitution? Chemerinsky asked. The honest answer is, we don't know. And that's scary. He warned that if the courts give a clear, unambiguous order, and the president still refuses to comply, the country enters very dangerous territory. If no one stops him, not Congress, not the courts, then the president can do whatever he wants, Chemerinsky said. That includes ignoring other laws, disobeying court rulings, and even jailing political opponents without consequences. At that point, he said, we're not a democracy anymore. We're living under a dictatorship. The crisis, it seems, has arrived. Democrats in Congress have been raising alarms too, some saying Trump has already crossed the line into authoritarian behavior and pushed the country into a full-blown constitutional crisis. On Monday night, Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat California, posted on X, formerly Twitter. The constitutional crisis is here. He also shared a nearly 6-minute video explaining the complex Abrego Garcia case, the Trump administration's actions, and why it all matters. This is a constitutional crisis, Schiff said. Because the administration has been ordered by the court to return a man who was wrongfully deported, to help get him back. And instead of doing that, Trump basically told the Supreme Court to get lost during a White House meeting. Schiff pointed out that at no time during that Oval Office meeting did President Trump ask the president of El Salvador to send Garcia back, even though Garcia had been wrongly sent to a maximum security prison there. It just never happens, he said. Schiff concluded that Trump had taken a clear step toward dictatorship. Professor Chemerinsky agreed, saying the country is already in a constitutional crisis. Not just because of the sheer number of unlawful actions by the administration, but also because of the Trump team's refusal to obey the courts in the Garcia case. It could get worse, Chemerinsky said, but that doesn't change the fact that we're already in crisis. He added that it was clearly illegal for the government to ignore a court order and send someone to a dangerous prison in another country without due process. The administration's excuse, that it can't bring Garcia back because he's now in a foreign prison, simply makes no legal sense. That's basically saying the government can throw anyone into a foreign prison, he said. That's how you build a gulag.